Hi and good morning everyone. I'm Nadia and now I'm going to present to you guys the subchapter of chapter 15, which is social linguistics and education. My presentation this morning is divided into four main sections. First, vernacular dialects and educational disadvantage. Second is linguistic deficit. Third is social linguistic and forensic language. And last but not least is the conclusion. With the first section, which is vernacular dialects and educational disadvantage. How vernacular dialects can affect the children's education. But remember that we will always comparing these two classes of children, which are middle class children and working class children. There are three main ideas for this section. The first one is language analogies affect educational programs. Next, while linguists agree that no variety is inherently better, power differentials result from the prestige associated with the certain varieties. Lastly, social, emotional, and educational disadvantages result from this differential. Move on to the next slide. Numerous social linguists have been brought into open discussions about the educational ramifications of their research. Discussions over the spot of vernacular dialects in school and the cases that children who utilize vernacular structures are phonetically denied or lacking. The first point is, in numerous discourse networks, middle-class children improve at school than working-class children. For instance, they get better results. So also, however, there are a few exceptions. Children from the standard culture, for the most part, have more noteworthy achievement in school than minority bunch kids. Why is this happened? It is proof that because of the influence of vernacular dialects. From the textbook, we can see that they are comparing the children between the working class who use vernacular varieties or dialects and the children from middle class who use standard English or language. One of the factors that lead the children from middle class to do better at school is because the use of vernacular forms or a distinct variety may act as a barrier to communication between teachers and students. Since the students have certain dialect that is very different from the standard language, it may lead them to miscommunication because they cannot understand each other very well. So basically these 2 points are actually linked. Okay, the last point is teachers and parents simply waste their time correcting children's usage if the children do not want to sound different. Social linguists have called attention to that endeavors to adjust individuals' discourse without their full collaboration are fruitless. Individuals can change their own discourse in the event that they truly need to. It has been noticed that when youngsters emulate their teachers for the sake of entertainment, or when they pretend a working class individual in a game or a school movement, they regularly produce reliably standard structures for whatever length of time that required. Motivation and free decision are vital variables, and any endeavors to encourage standard vernacular structures won't prevail without them. Next, what is the roles of social linguists regarding this issue? In English-speaking communities, these realities that regularly been misleadingly connected to the way that kids from the successful groups will in general utilize standard dialect forms, which is standard English, while the scores of kids from the less successful groups frequently incorporates a more prominent recurrence of vernacular structures. This is a zone where a few social linguists have put forth incredible efforts to be helpful. Some social linguists have undertaken research to investigate the extent to which the utilization of vernacular structure or a distinct variety. For example, from the textbook, where patois in Britain may act as a barrier to communication between the teachers and also the students. In addition, Some social linguists have developed programs to change teachers' negative attitudes and develop their appreciation of linguistic diversity, as well as interpreted the results of social linguistics research for teachers. Apart from that, social linguists are also responsible to provide advice and recommendations for classroom practice, also provide service training for teachers. And last but not least, one of the roles of social linguists is to educate community to accept variation and vernacular forms. We can clearly understand the roles of social linguists when we look at the examples given in the textbook. Okay, this is the example given in the textbook. Example 12. In 1977, Moira Louise was 8 years old. She lived in the city of Ann Arbor in the USA in Greenwood, an area where there were both rich and poor people. She went to the local school, Martin Luther King Elementary School. It was a school with mainly white children, but there were also some African American children like Moira and a few Asian and Latino children. By the time Moira was 8, her mother was getting concerned that she was not doing well at school. She talked to some of the other African American mothers and found they were worried too. The school took the view that Moira and her African American friends were a problem. They labeled them as learning disabled. But Moira's mother and her friends knew better. Their kids were perfectly healthy, bright children. It was the school which was failing, not the children. The mothers decided to take the school to court, claiming that the teachers were not adequately providing for the children's education. The mothers won the case, and the school was required to provide a program for Moira and her friends, which gave them a better chance of educational success. So, in this example, the African American moms contended that the neighborhood school was not assessing their kids' etymological capability and educational needs. Various social linguists were called as expert witnesses to affirm that the various of English utilized by the children was a dialect distinct from SAE, with a particular history and birthplaces in the Creole which grated on American slave plantations. The judge acknowledged the declaration and requested the school to assess highlights of the kids' dialects. He called attention to that the teachers and students could understand one another and communicated the view that the primary boundaries to the children's advancement appeared as oblivious negative perspective held by the teachers to kids who spoke AAVE. But first, what is SAE? SAE is Standard American English. The term Standard American English customarily refers to a variety of the English language that is generally used in professional communication in the United States and taught in American schools. It may refer to either written English or spoken English, and it can be both. Next, what is AAVE? AAVE stands for African American Vernacular English, also called Bad English or Ebonics, a blend of the words Ebony and Phonics. AAVE is unfairly stigmatized and sometimes labeled Bad English, but the grammar is actually as complex as Standard English, Standard American English (SAE), possibly even more so and with different rules. The steps that were taken to cure this circumstance comprise essentially of in-service training for the teachers. This included, for instance, helping them recognize between features of the children's dialect and reading errors and proposing ways they could enable the kids to build up the capacity to switch between AAVE and SAE. As what I have mentioned before, dialect differences can surely prompt miscommunication, particularly if vernacular dialects users do not hear a lot of the standard dialect. In most English-speaking communities as in Arbor, there is little proof that kids who utilize vernacular structures experience difficulty understanding the standard English they hear on television, on radio, and from the teachers. Okay, now move on to the example 13. But before that, you need to know that the B sentences are the charged repetition of the A sentences. Okay, the first sentence is nobody ever sat at any of that but the child's repetition will be like, nobody never sat at no desserts. The second sentence is, I asked Alvin if he knows how to play basketball, but the child's repetition be like, I asked Alvin, do he know how to play basketball? So, from this example, social linguists have shown that in certain communities, kids clearly comprehend the standard language, since when they are asked to repeat sentences in the standard, they regularly make an interpretation of them precisely into the vernacular equivalents, as the pairs of the sentences in example 13 illustrated. As what I have mentioned before, to alter people's speech without their full cooperation are fruitless, since motivation and free choice are crucial factors. Nonetheless, kids can see some point in having the option to utilize standard forms consistently in certain contexts, for example, job interview. And at that point, with the guidance given by social linguists, teachers can give students directions on which vernacular structures are generally remarkable to listeners. I have mentioned before that the social linguist's role is also to educate the community to acknowledge the variety and vernacular forms without condemning or stereotyping the users as uneducated and low status, rather than to prepare vernacular users to adopt standard speech forms. Okay, the next section is language deficit. As you all know, deficit is lacking or not enough. Okay, linguistic deficit is a selected area where sociolinguistic research has proved useful is in the area of educational testing. So actually, we are emphasizing or focusing on the language testing. Sociolinguists have successfully demonstrated that claims that minority group children and working class children were linguistically deprived were generally based on inadequate tests. The significant contribution that sociolinguists have made in this area is to give evidence about the impact of relevant factors on discourse. So, as to decide the level of their vocabulary and grammar, it is normal to ask a kid to do a number of language tests at once. These tests were regularly managed by an adult stranger from an opposed social background from the kids, and in some cases from a different ethnic group from the kids as well. When in doubt, every children was interviewed individually in a peaceful room in the school. Okay. For the first point, children from minority group and working class backgrounds who were tested under this contribution generally did not do well. The reason is because they responded monosyllabically, saying as little as possible and escaping with relief after it was all over, while middle-class children tend to do much better since they are willing to answer questions at length. Next, language deficit occurs among children are influenced by their experience, the way they responded in the test. For instance, children from homes where adults don't read for entertainment and where reading is not a normal everyday activity tend to develop a different range of vocabulary. Apart from that, why working class children fail in school? The answer is the last point, which is it is because the odds are stacked against them and the middle class advantage. Okay, what is the odd that's stacked against them? The first one is the criteria for success are middle class criteria, including middle class language and ways of interacting. Familiarity with the jargon basic to class achievement gives middle class children a favorable position. The second reason identified by the social linguists is that a large number of the kids, perceiving that schools are basically middle class organizations, intentionally and understandably rebel against all that they represent. Okay, for this slide, which is example 14, Michelle came home from school after her history exam. How did you get on? Asked her mother. What did they ask you? I had to write about Captain Cook, Michelle replied. What did he say? Asked her mother. So Michelle told her all the interesting stories about Captain Cook's adventures that she had recounted in her exam answer. Finally, her mother interrupted. But didn't you mention that he was one of the first Europeans to discover New Zealand? Oh no, she replied. I think they know that. Okay, from this example, it indicates that the sort of question the interviewer posed would likewise be increasingly recognizable to the middle-class children. Working-class guardians are substantially more liable to ask children to display what they know. This can be seen in the example given, where Michelle needs to tell mother about the history exam. Okay, in spite of the fact that those regulating the test imagined that they were overseeing this test under norm and controlled conditions, there were in reality some significant contrasts in encounters of working-class children, contrasted with others being tested. An adult stranger is more peculiar, utilizing the standard dialect, would be bound to look like the companion of your mother, or further on the off chance that you were a middle-class child. If you were not a middle-class children, your experience of adults who utilize the standard variety would be teachers, social welfare workers, and government authorities, not the kind of individuals a kid would probably need to talk for long if it could be avoided. In this example, it also indicates that testing conditions are not the same for all the children. For instance, when the grandma visits, little Pauline is instructed to tell his grandma what he did on Sunday. This kind of questions is utilized in language tests as well. For example, tell me everything about this picture. To a child who is used to being posed questions like this, questions which the examiner clearly know the appropriate answer or response, such guidelines are not an issue. Other children may discover them astounding and wonder if there is a trick included. From this example also, social linguists also provide that children who responded monosyllabically in a test interview were voluble and communicative in different contexts. For example, with their friends. One researcher demonstrated that the evaluative developments utilized in storytelling by the African American young people that he recorded were more formatively progressed or developed than those utilized by the whites. In simple words, he asserts that these children were etymologically inadequate or had no language or were constrained to a limited code could be entirely disproved. The formality and unfamiliarity of the testing context for these children represented the deceptive induction that they were linguistically deprived. Okay, last but not least, social linguists demonstrate that children's language was linguistically systematic and well-structured and not inadequate. It was pointed that the language of the test was increasingly like the working-class children than to that of kids from other social groups. At the point where reactions to the test questions were analyzed, it was discovered that occasionally answers which were authentically right yet which utilized vernacular forms were checked wrong, since they didn't actually coordinate the type of the appropriate responses on the marking scheme. Now let's move on to the example 15. 15 years old Alan was totally disgusted with his English teacher. She's not interested in our ideas, he said, or whether we are original or creative. All she cares about is big words. The guy who gets top marks uses the thesaurus. He just looks up the longest words he can find and sticks them in. He doesn't even know what they mean half the time. So from this example, at secondary school, social linguists have investigated more specifically the manners by which the jargon scope of middle-class children contrasts from that of working-class children. Through wide reading of the sorts of books that teachers affirm of and exposure to the jargon of well-educated adults, the children are more familiar than others with the words expressions of racial Latin origin. Words like education, exponent, relation, and expression make up between 65% and 100% of the specialist vocabularies of subjects educated in secondary schools and tertiary institutions. Clearly, children who know about such words will get the benefits. Okay, one investigation demonstrated that between the ages of 12 and 15, big contrast created in the oral utilization of such words kids from various social backgrounds. Kids who use expressions of Gradual-Latin beginning with recognition and certainty are plainly found to prevail in tests which require information on such jargon in specifically subject areas. Okay, all in all, this section indicates that structural differences between standard and vernacular varieties may lead to inaccurate assessments of children's educational potential. Differences between groups in the perceptions of the appropriate ways of talking in a variety of contexts may also lead to an inaccurate evaluation of children's ability. Okay, we're going to look at the third section, which is social linguistics and forensic linguistics. What is linguistics? Forensic linguistics is a branch of applied linguistics involving the examination of language evidence in a criminal or civil matter, and it can be carried out for two broad purposes. Forensic linguistics is another area where social linguists can make a contribution to redressing social injustices based on the misconceptions about language use and language variation. Now move on to the example 16. Raj, a man with a strong West Indian accent, was accused of murder in Britain. During his trial, the prosecution alleged that Raj had stated that he had got on a train and shot a man to kill. A social phonetician was able to demonstrate that what Raj had actually said was that he got on the train and shot a man ticket. So the person transcribing the West Indian man's statement in this case was unfamiliar with the variety of English that he spoke, and so, although she honestly transcribed what she thought he said, she was wrong. Fortunately, a qualified linguist who was familiar with the range of variation in different dialects of English was able to provide an alternative and much more reliable account of what the West Indian was said. Okay. Now, what is the use of forensic linguists? Forensic linguists work in a wide scope of social settings. The first one is how language is used in written and spoken legal settings. Secondly, forensic linguists also provide expert evidence to courts about language issues, which involves analysis of language and communication in legal contexts like police interviews, courtroom interaction, and legal documents. Apart from that, forensic linguists are also to examine language used in academic writing, for instance, plagiarism cases in trademarks, phone conversations, and text messaging and email interaction. Next, forensic linguists are also responsible to identify social linguistic clues and understanding which will assist in resolving legal questions and contribute to justice being done. Okay, forensic linguists are also as expert witnesses to court cases involving murder, sexual assault, kidnapping, fraud, drug dealing, and many more such serious crimes or legal injustice. Last but not least, forensic linguists examine every level of linguistic analysis. We will look at the level analysis now. From the slide, we can see that there are four analysis levels. The first one is phonetic analysis, which provides information on regional and social accents, which usually assisted in eliminating crime suspects. So, for example, a British dialectologist was able to accurately identify the Sunderland accents on hooks sent to the police by someone who claimed to be the infamous serial killer known as the Yorkshire Ripper. The linguist's phonetic analysis was proved correctly 26 years later when DNA from the envelope still confirmed the identity of the hoaxer. Okay, the second level analysis is lexical evidence, which is used to demonstrate the likelihood of plagiarism. Language specialists help in tending to a portion of the debates encompassing the source of the materials like in the Da Vinci Code. Social linguists have assisted in recognizing attributes of the infamous author of less public texts, for example, mysterious undermining lexis. It is regularly possible to distinguish features which propose that the author is not a local speaker of English, for example, or that they are not highly educated or that they come from a specific social or ethnic background. The next analysis level is grammatical evidence, which has supported claim that a text written to explain procedures was incomprehensible, thus excusing an error which had serious consequences. Linguists have additionally distinguished syntactic methodologies which can burden observers in legal disputes. For example, the defense lawyers usually use passive voice and intransitive verbs to avoid ascribing agency to person accused of a crime. We can see this in the example 17. You think you were cheated? Your shirt came off. Your arms were held over your head. So were your legs bruised? Okay, from the example, the lawyer has disappeared and the attention has moved to the person in question. The syntactic type of a question constrains the scope of admissible answers, and thus the range of information the addressee doesn't hesitate to offer as represented. For instance, if you are in the court and you are posted the questions, did you drink multiple glasses of beer? At that point, hindered by the formal context, you may feel you are limited to just answer yes. A more informative response may be, I had 3 small glasses more than 4 hours enjoyed by an enormous meal. Additionally, the last answer may well give a progressively helpful premise to assessing your capacity to thrive the end of the night. On to the next slide, which is example 18, prosecution lawyer. So you were wandering around the area for over 2 hours at night. Accused, I was walking around the district looking for a shop. As I mentioned before, the semantic features of words can convey different associations with important consequences. From the example, we notice that the accused said that he or she was walking around, which sounds purposeful, while wandering around suggests pointless activity. An exquisite distinction which might be huge to the impression that the jury frames about somebody's character. In certain dialects, going to party infers drugs and sexual action, or it implies that simply go to a gathering and such differentiations might be noteworthy under interrogation. The semantic scope of words can be significant. For instance, when a tourist rate cruel, execute implies hurt or harm. The potential for cross-culture misunderstanding and the genuine ramification is an attack or murder case are self-evident. Slide shows example 19. Okay. PO stands for police officer. Okay, the first one is police officer. Okay, now, do you agree that just a short time ago in the company of Ferry Peters, you were Sergeant Alan Reed, your rights as person in custody? Suspect quietly and say, yeah. So, police officer, and that was this problem here, this cautionary summary of Part 108 on in the Fourth Crimes Act. And the suspect and say, yeah. Okay, the police officer answer, okay, and you signed that? And then the suspect answered, yes, I did, yeah. And then the police officer said, okay, now, did you understand that? And then the suspect answered, yes. Okay, and then the police officer asked him, what do you understand by your rights? And then The suspect said, "Oh, my right?" The police officer asked him, "Do you understand that this while you are in police custody that police have certain that they have a duty of care to do certain things for you?" And then the suspect said, "Yeah." Okay, but first, what is Miranda warning? Okay, Miranda warning is advice about the rights that the police are required to give to people who are suspects before they begin an interview. This indicates to the advice about their privilege that the police are required to give individuals who are suspects before they start an interview. Sociolinguistic examination of the discourse recommends that discussions between the police and the suspects, as far as anyone knows, essentially clarifying the speculate privileges, include influence and recommendation in some cases, as well as consolation and expressions of sympathy in others. Okay, based on the example in line 12, the police officer did not provide the opportunity for the suspect to explain his rights in his own. In line 13, when the suspect expresses his uncertainty or "my rights," the police officer responds in a long utterance, as you can see in line 14 until 16, which is full of terminology. Sociolinguistics examines of countless police suspects interviews demonstrate that suspects regularly consider questions as "What do you understand by your privilege?" as challenging and face-threatening. There is such a great amount to consider and evaluate in even a short extract. For example, these and some legal forensic linguists have put effort to convey the results of such investigations so they can be utilized in police training. The first example that we are going to look at is example 20. Okay. Question is, Q is the prosecuting lawyer, Connie is the rape victim. So, Q. And I take it part of your involvement then on the evening of January 27th, and having Mr. A come back to your residence that you felt you were in this comfort zone because you were going to a place that you were very familiar, correct? And Connie said, "It was my home, yes." So Q, and you knew you were had a way of if there was any difficulty? And Connie said, "I didn't really take this account any difficulty. I never expected there to be any." And Q, I appreciate that. Nonetheless, you knew that there were other people around who knew you and obviously would come to your assistance. I take it if you had some problems. Or do you know? Maybe you can't answer that. So Connie answered, "No, I can't answer that. I can't answer that. I was inviting him to my home, not my home that I share with other people, not a communal area. I was taking him to my home, and I really didn't take into account anybody else around, anybody that I lived near. It was like inviting somebody to your home." And the Q, "Fair enough, and I think it from what you told us in your evidence this morning that it never ever crossed your mind when this whole situation reached the point where you couldn't handle it or were no longer in control to merely go outside your door to summon someone." And the last one is Connie, "No." Okay, forensic linguists have utilized discourse analysis to analyze court communication for proof of potential unfairness. In cross-examination, the lawyer's selection of words can be extremely huge in passing on a specific point of view. Sexual assault trial are ideal objective for such analysis, and social linguists, for example, Susan, have distinguished various pragmatic strategies which lawyers use to propose that the victim was willing instead of resistant. Okay, the underlying question control the direction and extent of the discourse by stating a suggestion that it is a sensible one, and that the addressee will affirm it. The law utilized the word new in lines 8 until 11, fortified by the word obviously line 13, which infers that what is being stated is a fact and which presupposes it is valid. The aggregated declaration subvert Penny's situations by proposing there was help accessible and she didn't look for it. Moreover, the word merely in line 29 recommends that it would have been easy to look for such assistance, indirectly accusing her of not doing as such and avoiding the assault. The after effect of the reliable utilization of such methodologies is the de-strengthening of the female complainant. Through the manners by which the lawyer's questions are planned, she is delicately constructed as will to find a way to save herself. Now that we have come to the end of this chapter, it can be concluded that the attitudes of language that happen in the society can influence by the community of the language itself as an education to communicate and understand each other. Language attitudes are very sensitive to social political change. I think that's all from me. Thank you.